Welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Impact of AI and Big Data. Today I have with me, now she's been here before, but things change, so it's good to have her back. This is Julienne Ryan. She
Hello there.
focuses on communications in a virtual world. She has a book that she's written about it, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that, but welcome.
Thank you very, very much. It's always good to see you and always good to revisit conversations, which is what we two preach about a little bit. So I'm looking forward to our chat. Always a good thing with you.
I did skip your introduction because I know things have changed over the past year and a half since we've last talked on this, since we've last talked. Give us a little update on what's been going on.
Well, thank you. Since we last talked about my book, I wrote a new edition of it in the post-COVID world because I wanted to kind of capture a little bit of the experience that everybody had when we were all working in hybrid and kind of poking fun a little bit about our experiences. Like many of us, I had my spouse moved into the house to teach virtually to teach calculus. And that was a very interesting living experience where I could hear him lecturing through the floorboards, and I was doing my own coaching and podcast. So when I conceived the second edition of the book, it was to create an extra section of resources, some fun visuals that we can use every day to remind us. And I'll talk a little bit more later about that. And then create some questions because we can read a book, can make an impression, and I wanted to give people an opportunity to really kind of work with the book and think about where they get themselves into trouble. I wanted to have an opportunity for people to use it as a reflection page. And it's like having me coach in their ear because I kind of write and yell at somebody in the book to not skip over a page, to think about how they put their foot in their mouth, things they could have done differently, and what they're going to do over the next time they work. So I wrote the book for whether you're a professional or whether you're a person who's leading their own team at home, or whether you're a teacher looking to figure out how to get everyone to look up and pay attention to each other in the classroom, to collect data and learn how to communicate and build some good relationships with each other. Because no matter what tool we're using, we still have humans to contend with.
I like that. I'm going to read a quote from a review of your book. CEO of Narrative, her playbook has that unique combination of insight and humor, which makes it a must-read for anyone who wants to up their communication game. She delivers her plays with a personal touch that makes them memorable, relatable, and most importantly, actionable. When we talked earlier, it was really focused on, our digital world, our virtual world. But I want to fast forward that to, yes, we still have, virtual, we still have digital, but more and more AI technologies are impacting us in a lot of different ways. Hence, the name of the podcast. But, but one in particular, when I was thinking about this and thinking about you, it was around communications. I see how I interact with digital is different now than even 2 years ago. How I see the information that's coming from these computer systems or these websites where AI is hyper personalized and feeding me information. That information then now changes how I communicate with my coworker. As we use and interact with these tools, how these tools are using these technologies and giving us back information, and then we turn around and regurgitate that information to my coworker, and then we found out that that wasn't quite accurate, or maybe that wasn't, perfectly where I was going. That whole dynamic of communication has completely changed. We're now not 100% confident in the information that maybe we're getting from our coworkers because they're getting it from somewhere that's being driven by an AI technology. And that's why I brought you back on today.
Well, thank you. And Most of the things you've mentioned are things I was taking some notes on. I always do a little brainstorming before a session,
Mhm.
and I was reflecting on some sessions I've sat on where people are talking about, various uses of AI, and what you just shared with us about ChatGPT and the different versions. And what I've said for this technology and others, when it comes to, we have opportunities with this tool to learn and help us. But I think we need to remind ourselves not to forego our own critical thinking skills, and to question, and to look for multiple resources. That would be the same guidance I had when we were relying strictly on print sources to when we start to go the internet. Finding out who's writing the information, what the resources are, and cross-checking onto multiple resources important, especially when it's hard research that you're doing for clients or for work. When ChatGPT came out, also, there's a hue and cry about the creativity to say, and there's been a huge union strike with the SAG-AFTRA people that they've starting to settle about that. So it's making decisions about where is their opportunity and where do you are at risk to losing some things of value. Now, we can get a little lazy too when we have all these resources at our advantage. So when we're looking at really being an expert in this subject, I think it's going to take a lot of discipline to really train us to start to use the source, and also take time to think about not foregoing the power of our brain and our own experiences and history to challenge it. So to use it as a complement, not to take over all of our thinking and all of our doing and writing. I've seen some students, or I've seen some coaching clients like playing with it. And a lot of times ChatGPT gives total misinformation, but like a human, when we know we're right, I think it's a great analogy. It says it with such conviction that they're right that you believe it. And it's no different than a human with an opinion we don't agree about. So I
Mm,
think
that's good.
we have to treat it as it is. It's a living thing that's moving, and it's going to make assumptions. To your point, it only had limited data up to a certain point. It's saying, and then when it's given a problem that it doesn't know the answer, I also know it can make up some really weird stuff that people have, put their resume in, or filled in programs and got some hilarious answers too. So I see the value. It's done wonders for some areas to get the brain thinking, to get brainstorming, get some concepts. But I'm saying with anything, don't give up full control. I've talked to you offline, and you've probably heard me complain about my car GPS system, or the voice active system. I preach patience and listening in these workshops, not so much in my car, because the car and I are still having battle after 5 years. It doesn't listen to me. So I know what's helped me when I use it is when I use the travel system. I have to look at my routes before. I want to say I want to use it as an enhancement, but I'm not going to give up all control. And if I know I have a common sense answer to how to get from point A to B, I need to still be a participant in this conversation. And I think anybody who's involved in leading a group or teaching going forward has to really work hard to institute critical thinking and really questioning what their resources are, and build trust. Because once you get a bad answer, or you get wrong information, somebody, you've broken the trust. So it is like it's another analogy for things we're experiencing right now when we get our communications. Who's behind it? Who's writing it? What's the purpose of it? And what other sources do I need to explore?
At first, when you started to answer the question, my thought was, oh gosh, this is going to require more effort, using these
Mm-hmm.
tools and technologies. But you kind of brought it back with, how is this any different when a consultant comes in and communicates something specific? Do
Mm-hmm.
you trust do you have a trust that that consultant is a reliable source, or is gleaning their information from reliable sources? So yeah, I kind of went kind of full circle in your response, that even with the technology and utilizing the technology in the way we are going forward, and what we hope to use it in the future, it's not adding more work because of our impact in communication. It's the same work we had before. We're just kind of forgetting the basic skill sets that we once had learned. Is that what I'm?
It is. And I think when we write, like I do creative writing and blog posts as you do, and coach, that we don't lose confidence in our own skills to practice that habit of what's creative, what our internal voice is telling us, and go on a leap and say, let me immediately research something and get a quick answer. um, I know in my early days when I was years ago, I was planning programs for an association, and I did a lot of I did some reflection on what I thought would be appealing to people, but I didn't trust my own gut at first. I went and did research until I got validated. And on one hand, it was smart because what I was thinking about actually dovetailed what the market was looking at and what conversations and conferences were. But I was important that I listened to myself first and then did my own homework and backed it up and talked to people. So I want, especially if you're coming up into this world of ChatGPT, that you don't stall your own reasoning and internal functions, to trust your gut sometimes and validate it.
Some of the things that you had talked about, and I did read your book, by the way. Did read your book. I want to start leveraging some of the content. The quote that I read was your plays. And it sounds like that's this strategic methodology that we can apply right now. Is that the definition of a play?
It is. When I came up with the plays, I was thinking about how could I write something that's simple and memorable about how we all, you, me, everyone gets into trouble, and what's some things that inform how we experience another person when we have misinformation or when we have good connection. One of it is assumptions. When we make an assumption and we think we have the answer, we've written the whole script. So we get in trouble. The first play that I came up with was Be Authentic. And it was about, sometimes we show up, we think we have this artifice that we have to put forward, the proper, what's the right accent to have. And my play came out of the fact that when I was asked to do a speech years ago, I panicked when I found out I had a room of 500 people. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to see this short little woman on the stage and hear her New York Queens accent and think, why is she here? And when I got over that part to say I can only show up as myself and be authentic, it was a very freeing moment, because it freed me up not just to appreciate my own experiences, but also approach other people with a fresh light, to put them at their ease so they felt more comfortable being who they are and how they present in their experiences. So we may not always agree with everybody else's experiences, but if we pause to listen. So that was part of being authentic and keeping it together. So, and I'm not going to go through all the 8 plays, but one of it had to do with asking more questions and being curious. I used this old actor as a Columbo that was big in the 60s and 70s as the prompt, because a lot of valuable things happen, not when they're scripted and planned, but when you're in a conversation and we take more time to listen and be present than write the answer in our head or be worrying about what our next question is going to be. Because lo and behold, there's good information that client will feel about what they can express. They'll pick up on your energy and they will feel like they can take some risks in sharing. Now, you talk about data, and I can tell you all the times when I slow things down to let that person experience the conversation where they were in their own head, amazing things came up: creativity, ingenuity, trust, things that informed their experience of why they were forming an opinion or what informed their negativity. So slowing down in this very busy, let's get it done world
Hmm.
can be a big gift in a situation, and it can take down a lot of tension and conflict.
That's actually, it goes back to the basics, but that's so true. I think that the technology we're using, the whole point of AI is to augment the human in areas that we're now just too slow, or the human is now creating a barrier to get that problem solved. The AI technology can sift through data 5 times faster and get us 80% response rates versus a human trying to do it and taking in months and months.
Correct.
But I think what just hit me is, because now we're leveraging this technology and we're starting to feel more confident in using it, perfect example, going back to the chat interface, we're getting responses back in seconds. I specifically went out and said, write me a short, funny poem from a 10-year-old girl about losing a puppy. 9 seconds later, I got a full poem. Way better than what I could have come up with my own, and also extremely faster. But now, listening to you, talk about these skill sets, I'm starting to realize that I'm becoming so shaped by those quick responses. It's becoming the norm. I'm expecting my results now in a couple seconds, and I'm moving very quickly as I'm snapping while I'm talking to you. And your feedback here is, we have to remember to slow down, because we're going to continue to be driven by technology to go faster and faster and faster.
There's a gift in a situation. I've been reading about, the amazing things that are being able to use in science and medical and research, and a whole positive wealth of information that can come out of it. But there's also a cost sometimes. So I think weighing the gift versus what we need to just keep vision and keep learning. Now, I'm concerned also because in our society, my husband's an educator, and we've always have conversations about the learning. In a lot of schools, we've been teaching to the test, not so much learning for learning's sake, that teach to the test. What's the correct answer? And I've seen some of the results in clients and team building situations now. Being disciplined when you're working something, that you don't fall into just using ChatGPT, because we can also lose confidence. It's like being a kid in class and you see the kid that's cheating. They're getting the right answer, but they don't have a context and they're not learning. And that they're getting an easy win in that moment till they get caught, but they're not looking at the confidence that they need to do to fail. And that's the other thing. We need to learn how to fail constructively. That's where creativity comes, and to dice it. So taking a shortcut sometimes is great. Experiment, use it, but also teach yourself how to fail creatively and take some chances with your own internal voice or internal ideas before you dump to say, let's deviate and, use what we think is an easy win. So I think this is a endless conversation that's going to be involving, because we see the good and the challenge on so many of the technologies that's happening. So I'm not anti, and I'm not full pro. So I've seen both lately.
I'm going to read from the website. It's from Panorama Education. It specifically talks about what are the 21st century skills. I hear a lot more about the 21st century skill sets in elementary school from educational systems, talking about what we need to really be teaching our kids as they, move into the next generation. And I'm also hearing about it from the HR departments in, hey, right now, what are the types of things that we should really be looking for beyond the hard skills? And the 4 C's, and there's a lot to it, but the 4 C's are citizenship, creativity, critical thinking, and communication. I'm going to read to you what communication, how they define it. Communication is appropriately interacting with others to convey meaning and gain understanding for multiple purposes, settings, and audiences, including the digital environment. I think what I liked about their definition of communication for the future was understanding multiple purposes. I think that links back to what you were just saying a moment ago.
Yeah, and I'm smiling because I brought up some of those C's without we didn't practice this ahead of time. That it
No,
came out
we didn't.
naturally. So it's like a test retest. But I think, and one of the words that came to mind when you were reading that is one of the outputs is empathy when we're communicating. It's nuance. It means listening to different cues and paying attention. So are there systems going to be empathy? You might get the right words in a message, but learning to trust what empathy is, and learning again, it's the beauty of unscripted conversations where you can listen and just get unexpected reactions and talking and learning. And when we were in COVID, the full blown COVID, we lost a little bit of that because when I was speaking with clients and coaching them, they miss being in person, not because they wanted to be in a room with their co-workers, hearing everything about their life in open space environment, but they missed a little bit of that turn around and talk to somebody in a meeting or walk down the hallway and have those small moments that build confidence and trust when you're working together and building rapport. So we are energy creatures, and we were exhausted on Zoom because we were constantly on Zoom, because the human body doesn't know that you and I are, separated by miles. It knows you're a living thing, and it's always trying to connect with you. So we have to figure out how we balance our diet of how we're taking in information, how we're using it, and how we're being critical of see the opportunity, and also say, what else can I be doing to just test my skills and really challenge myself?
So I want to circle back to the topic of trust. We've talked about trust in trusting where the source is coming from, trusting the individual, trusting ourselves, really. But in hearing some of the conversations that we had today, there's still this balance. We still need to understand the digital environment, the virtual environment, the information that's coming to us in multiple ways. What does that balance look like?
I think using the different opportunities we have to communicate to the best of our abilities. And one thing that I've noticed this year for client requests for in-person experiences is they use Zoom. Sometimes they're separated by a whole country, but more and more clients were asking for in-person events where they were using it to build some team experiences and communications, to have a deeper connection with their employees and each other, so they could touch on tougher subject, or when it came to a crunch, or when it came to a bigger situation, they had some rapport, they had some foundational just understanding of who the other person is. They weren't just another stranger in another screen. And it has made a difference. And I think it was very interesting to see how that naturally evolved. That was the same experience. Having those experiences in a room and then going off and doing live things with each other was the nature of what those were. They took them for other team buildings. One person did graffiti in Brooklyn. Another person went on walking tours to learn the history, but giving people some time to decompress and just learn about each other, to develop context. That's another C word that I'm a big fan of. It's context means you may, again, not agree, but you have a little bit of the backstory and what informs that person experiences, how they arrive at their decisions, what informs their hearing. And when you can do that, when the heat is not on, you're doing yourself a favor and you're doing your team a favor. And that's how we learn from each other. It's the small stories. And we do learn from bullet points and PowerPoints, but we do learn more from listening to each other and eavesdropping on how people are thinking and working together. So I believe in a balance of live and virtual, and that'll make a big difference for teams going forward.
I was at a conference last week, and I had known this person on LinkedIn for over 2 years. And it didn't hit me until I saw this person in person that part of me felt like I really knew the person because we had been virtual for 2 years. But then seeing this person up front where I could, reach out and touch them, it was very surreal for me. Because then the other part of me was struggling with, well, you really don't know this person because you've never met them before. So it was a very unusual experience. But I could completely see how you take that experience or that feeling into the workplace, multiply it by 10, how the dynamics would change. Now I've noticed that she and I actually talk even better virtually because I have physically, met her in person.
When we do stories, I always say half your brain is listening and half the brain is capturing it and relating to its own story. And what you said about being at the conference reminds me of the time where I went to my first in-person event when COVID was loosening up. And I traveled down to this meeting and I felt like I was Margaret Mead on this island, like I was in an anthropological thing. I was like, ooh, humans, I've heard of them. And like the fact that I was walking around, it felt so weird. It felt so weird. Like I can walk here, I can walk towards them, I can walk away from them. And I used that energy in the room because it was different. That bravery of walking up to a group and talking to somebody uninvited or being spontaneous in your environments. It is a social skill. I'm not saying we'll do it in the street to total strangers all the time, but in your work environment, just building that confidence of having small moments to talk to somebody and appreciate. And so it's a skill we need to keep honing and learning and developing. So I can just see you doing that, going up and go, hi.
Oh my God, I can
You
touch
have
you now.
you have more than one, just like more than one side to you. And
You're more than
seeing it.
two-dimensional. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh
It is
my
fun.
gosh, you're funny. See, now you have to read the book just because she's funny.
Yeah, I know. I use it every day. I have to say, this is my own endorsement. Listen, I wrote the book for me. And I was in HR, married for decades. So it's on my desk every day going, you better do what you preach. It's like, so it's hard. And I did it like a Rorschach a kid's playbook with pictures that you can remember. Nobody has time to read a whole white paper when you're in trouble and you're going to get into more trouble. So the book was written with that in mind, that we're all the same, we're all connected, we're all trying to get better at what we're doing.
So it is time for us to wrap up. I'm going to ask you a question, but I'll give you a minute to think about it. And while you're thinking, I'm going to give an overview of what I learned from you today. So my last question for you is, what are some things that someone, or at least one thing that someone listening to this can start doing tomorrow? So I'm going to pause that for you. And while you think about it, here's what I learned today. It's okay that we don't know everything, that we need to trust ourselves just as much as we have that trust in others. We need to recognize where the source is coming from. This is no different, getting the information from an AI application is no different than getting the information from a study, which is no different than getting an information from a coworker or a consultant. It all goes back to trust the source. It is okay to keep asking questions, even though the information is coming from a technology where most people have this perception that, oh, information is coming from the machine, it may be more accurate. Recognizing that that's not necessarily the truth, that because it's a machine, it's oftentimes not as accurate. And finally, balance. Thinking through that some of the skill sets that we had learned 15, 20 years ago are still just as important now as they were 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last year. That was all I wrote down. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Oh,
at least you can read your own handwriting as opposed to me. So I want to say some of our inner hope, sometimes speaking for myself and listening, we always have this hope that whatever tool we're using to solve all and all our problems, serve all our needs, will be perfect. We'll never make a mistake. We'll never get in trouble again, and all our work will be done. But as far as I can see, that's not happening, and it hasn't been happening. So I think being an active participant in your communications and looking and being an active learner, it's not done, and using it for good, whatever we have at our disposal, and using it in a smart way. I mean, these things, which started my whole litany a few years ago, the phones, all positive. You send me an emoji saying, great, perfect. You send me a cryptic note, or when I send you a cryptic note, you go, what the heck are you talking about? And we started going back and forth. So use it with judgment, like you do everything else. And keep learning and keep finding new ways to show up and find out new information, what you're doing if you're listening to this podcast or you're watching it.
That was perfect. What a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for taking time out today.
Thank you very much. Always a joy. Thank you.